Hello, I am Ms. Suchitra Pareekh, Principal of Ramnivas Bajaj English High School. We will do biology lesson from ICSE syllabus Standard 9 on flower, carrying it forward from basic knowledge of understanding of the worlds of flower and its parts to some more terms related to the way the flower parts are modified. So, more about flowers. Sepals, petals, stamens and carpels. The four parts of the flower, the outermost whorl, calyx, made up of sepals. Usually we find calyx are made up of 5 sepals in most flowers. These 5 sepals, of course, there are flowers with lesser number also and some flowers with even more number of them. In a young flower, the function of the sepal is to being green, it carries out certain amount of photosynthesis also, but in a bud stage, it covers and completely protects the flower which is yet to be formed. So, its main function in a young flower is protection, in addition carrying out some amount of photosynthesis. These sepals may be when the flower is open, you will find them either free, separate from each other, you can count 5 of them or the more of them, and otherwise they may be united, Gamosepalous. When they are united, they often form a shape like a cup or a cone, and we can see that in case of a shoe flower very easily. The Epicalyx. Not all flowers have additional green leafy structure outside the sepals, outside the calyx. But some flowers do have, like in the shoe flower, there is an additional whorl of fine small leafy structures called episepals, epi outside, in addition to. And together all these 6 sepals as they are in the China rose, they are called Epicalyx. Episepals together make up Epicalyx. The whorl is called Epicalyx. Similarly, as in case of calyx, the parts are sepals, the whorl is called calyx. In case of episepals, parts are episepals and the whorl is called Epicalyx. The sepals, once the flower is open, may not remain green but may turn colorful. It looks like petals. They are called petaloid sepals, as we see in most gulmohar flowers. Brightly colored sepals are called petaloid sepals. Coming to the next whorl, next non-essential whorl, or also called vegetative whorl of the flower, the corolla. Corolla, like the calyx, in a young flower, in the bud condition, is all curled up together and is protecting the flower along with the calyx. It has arrangement in the form of a whorl which may be all in one circle or it may be in a form of a spiral. This we can only see when we are separating them out from the thalamus where they are attached, whether they are arranged in a circle or they are arranged in a spiral. The petals' main function is to attract the insects for pollination, also to provide a landing ground for the insect so that it can pollinate the flower, and therefore they are pretty large and firm when the flower is open. In the bud condition, it assists the calyx in protecting the inner reproductive whorl or the essential whorls of the flower. The stamens and carpels, they take a little longer to develop and they are protected even while they mature. The corolla, the petals, if they are free, we use the term polypetalous. Poly means free, separate. Each petal can be counted separately, polypetalous, like you see in the gulmohar flower. You find petals in Ipomia, morning glory, or even in a pea flower there where they are pea flower only 2 petals are united, but in morning glory all the petals are united together to form a cup-like, funnel-like structure. And then such corolla is called Gamosepalous corolla. The corolla is described to be Gamosepalous when all the corolla petals are united to form a single structure. The same happens with androecium, that is the stamens. Androecium is the third whorl, the male whorl, the essential whorl of the flower, made up of stamens. We know the stamen is made up of a thin thread-like filament with anthers on top. Again, they may be united. The union will be of filaments. The filaments may be free, then it is called polyandrous. The filaments may be many, they may be few. 5 usually there are, or there may be more than 5. The anther on top is the most essential part of the stamen. The anther is bilobed. It has 2 parts, it has 2 structures that make it up together. And when you take a cross section, as you can see here, of the anther, you find that each lobe consists of 2 sacs, and in these sacs are the ovules. You can make out the 4 chambers or locules that make up the pollen sac that makes up the 2 lobes of the anther. In this, all the powdery pollen grains are produced and stored. So, anther is a seat for production and storage of pollen or pollen grains, as we may call it. They look like yellow powder in most cases. If you have ever touched a matured flower, you will find sometimes a yellow powdery structure on your fingers or on your hand. That is the pollen, a matured flower. Pollen are of variety of shapes, There is a huge variety of size and shapes of pollen grain. The whole purpose of their size and shape is how it can get attached to the insects that is pollinating it, or how it can get carried away by the wind or the water, that is the pollinating agent, to be able to pollinate the flower. So, a few varieties is what you can see here in front of you on this slide. There are many, many types. It will be worth looking around when you find a pollen grain, if you have a magnifying glass or bring it to the laboratory under a dissecting microscope. It will be very interesting to see the variety of shapes, size and colors that we can see in the pollen grains. The stamens, as I said, the filament may be free or may be united. When the filaments are free, anthers obviously are free, then we call the stamen as polyandrous. Poly again free, androecium, andros. So, polyandrous. Polyandrous stamens are free stamens. Each stamen, filament and anther are separate. Sometimes the filaments are united. Then they form different types of structures. Monadelphous stamen is one such stamen where the filaments are united. They are united into mono one single tube. Typical example, China rose or hibiscus flower, shoe flower as we commonly call it. You find that all the filaments are united to form a single tube. So, monadelphous stamens, but the tip of the filament is free and anther is separate from each other. Monadelphous stamen, free anthers but united filaments. Sometimes, like in the pea flower and bean and other such flowers of that family, they have 10 stamens. 9 of them unite to form a single bundle, and 1 stamen is free. This helps it in its pollination the way it is, the shape of the flower the way it is. The diadelphous stamens, because it is forming 2 groups, dia to delphous is about the stamens. So, diadelphous stamens is stamens in 2 bundles, a staminal tube of 9 and a single free stamen. Polyadelphous stamen. In some flower like bombax, Filaments unite in different bundles, in different groups. They have millions, as if millions of filaments. And many filaments unite to form one bundle. Another many filaments, there is no number to it, form another bundle, third bundle. There might be 4, 5, 6 bundles of filaments forming Monadelphous stamens. All these modifications are for helping in pollination, the unique pollinating agent and situation that the flower is in. Now coming to the innermost whorl, the gynoecium. How is that adapted? Gynoecium, we know, consists of carpels, each carpel consisting of stigma, style and ovary. Stigma is the long thread-like structure which holds the broad base. The style is the long thread-like structure which holds the stigma out and away from the ovary, which is deep down into the flower. The whole idea of stigma being out is to be exposed to the pollen grain that may be carried, if it is wind pollinated, then by the wind, or insect pollinated, then by the insect or water. So the stigma is, it's important that the stigma is out. So stigma, style and ovary. Another very important thing is about the stigma, how it is modified so that it can receive enough of pollen grains. In some cases, the stigma is just a small little bulb-like. In some other cases, it is two-lobed. In some cases, it is pentalobed. In case of a shoe flower, you will find a 5-lobed stigma. In some other flowers, it is just two-lobed. But whichever is the case, it will be a landing space for the pollen grain. If it is a wind pollinated flower, it will still be a landing place for the pollen grain passing through in the wind, or if it is insect pollinated flower, it will pick up the pollen grain from the passing insect. In some cases, particularly in wind pollinated flower, the stigma may even have a shape like that of a feather. Now feather has many hair coming out of it, so it hangs outside the flower. In such case, the style is very, very long and the stigma hangs outside the flower, particularly most of the grasses. All the grains, the food crop that we eat, whether rice, wheat, etc., the stigma hangs outside with a long style. So it's hanging out, the wind blows, the pollen grains are there in it, and the feathery stigma catches a few pollen grains in it, and the next process continues. The style. As I was just talking about the wind pollinated flower, where the style may be long and hanging out of the flower. In some cases, the style may be long and standing out of the flower, a tubular style. In case of the grains, as I was talking about, the wheat, etc., there the style is very, very long and hangs really outside the flower. Here it is long, may not be very long, but it may stand out away from the anther. The whole idea of such a style is to prevent self-pollination. You can see the anthers are below and stigma is above. So pollen grain cannot rise up and get stuck to the stigma. Many flowers are modified in this manner. As we study more about pollination, we will understand that better. Let us understand the structure of ovary. The ovary, we know, consists of a chamber. It may be many-chambered, it may be a single-chambered ovary. Each chamber of the ovary is called a locule. So multiloculated or a uniloculated ovary. And in this chambers, the ovules are produced. The ovules are produced from a tissue called placenta. In most ovary, like in the shoe flower, it is placed in the center. But in flowers like that of cucumber, the placenta is found on the periphery, on the inner wall of the ovary. Placenta is the tissue through which the nourishment as well as the pollen grain, the pollen tube is going to come through. And it is through this tissue that the ovules are attached to the ovary. So placenta in the ovule and placentation. There are a variety of arrangements. It's a whole study of types of placenta in the ovary. Ovules are stuck inside with the placenta. Thank you all very much.